Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1504B, and today's date is February 21st, 2018, and the title of the episode is Clock is Activated, Protect Code Went Live, Timetable Accelerated. Q. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, the corporate media, they are pushing Russian collusion still. Not as much as they were before, but they're trying to mix it in with the 13 Russian trolls that Mueller presented and indicted. And again, they're not in this country. We don't have anything with Russia where they can bring them over here so they can stand trial. So the whole thing was a complete show. Now, to break this apart even further, Adrian Chen, who's a staff writer for The New Yorker, he kind of ripped this whole thing apart. Now, he was the first one that profiled the indicted Russian troll farm in 2015, and he was explaining what this troll farm is, and he's saying there's no reason to panic. It's made up of about 90 people now. The IRA has about 300 to 400 people in total. 90 are here in the United States. And they don't really have an understanding of U.S. politics. They just post things on Facebook, and they're really not a threat at all. And once again, this whole thing is completely falling apart. There's no real hard evidence. And I know that CNN and the rest are going around making this a really big deal, but you're not really comparing this to anything. They're just saying Russia was involved and there's Russian trolls. Did they look at China, Saudi Arabia, and the rest of the countries out there to find out that, yes, they have been doing the same exact thing in this country? They paid pretty much the same amount of money, and there's no difference because all the countries are doing this, where they're trying to influence the elections. Now, putting ads up and pretending you're someone else is not going to make millions and millions of people change their mind and make them vote someplace else. First of all, most of the ads were purchased after the elections. It wasn't towards one candidate. And we can see that this whole thing is ridiculous at this point. Now, what's very interesting about what is happening with Mueller is that a federal judge assigned to the criminal case against Trump's former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn has ordered special counsel Robert Mueller to turn over any exculpatory evidence to Flynn's defense. Oddly, however, Flynn's legal team did not make this request. Instead, Judge Emmett G. Sullivan issued the order, or at his discretion, invoking the Brady Rule, which requires prosecutors to turn over previously unfiled evidence that might have a material impact on a defendant's case. Interestingly, 2 days before the order, Mueller filed a motion for an agreed-upon protective order regarding the use of evidence in the case, including sensitive materials provided to Flynn's lawyers by the Office of the Special Counsel. The development has generated a buzz because this is quite odd, and Judge Andrew Napolitano addressed Sullivan's decision on Tuesday, saying the judge, on his own, not in response to any application from General Flynn's lawyers, says, by the way, I want all the evidence that could help Flynn or hurt the government, turned over to Flynn's lawyers. Now, this is very interesting because a lot of people are saying that Flynn really never pleaded guilty. And they're saying that he did. And they might have had some type of deal. He might be being blackmailed. And we can see right now that this is going to be a problem. This is where the deep state goes wrong. They use a lot of propaganda. They use a lot of words. They use the corporate media. Everyone believes it because you hear it on MSNBC, you hear it on CNN, you hear it on ABC, NBC, CBS, and all the news stations. And when somebody asks for hard evidence and proof, this is when it falls apart. Now, what they try to do is they try to have it repeated on so many different stations that every time you hear it, you start to believe that it's true. But when you really break it down and you ask for the actual evidence, that's where the whole thing gets messed up. Now, what's very interesting, the United States is meddling, and I shouldn't say the United States, I should say the deep state has been meddling in other countries' affairs, their election process, for a very long time. Now, They use different organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy organizations, and they funnel money through that to push their agenda. Soros uses many different NGOs to push his agenda. And we can see this is what the deep state has been doing all over the place. They're doing it in Thailand right now, where they want a certain leader back in power. They want him to continue in power. And they do this in all these different countries. And when it doesn't work, what they do is they go in and they have regime change. So Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, or any other country placing ads here and trying to sway people's, decision is absolutely ridiculous compared to what the deep state has been doing all along. And remember, I've always said this, whenever the deep state comes out, or the central bankers, and they tell you something, it's really about what they have been doing. It really is a reflection on what they do. When they say, oh, Russia is interfering, there's collusion. Think about it. Who's been colluding? Clintons, Mueller, the FBI. Who's been meddling in other people's elections? Oh, the CIA, the FBI. So you can see that it's always about them. Now, there's a news story out there saying that when Pence was over in South Korea at the Olympics, Kim Jong-un, his representative there, decided not to meet the vice president on the sidelines of the Winter Olympics. And they're saying that the Korean delegation pulled the plug on the meeting that they had scheduled, and they walked away from the meeting with Pence. Now, I don't think Pence is part of the Trump administration. I think he's part of the deep state. And I do believe there was information that Pence was going to try to mess the whole thing up with this peace process. And this is why the North Koreans walked away from this meeting, because they were tipped off about what was about to go down. And it looks like Pence was going to maybe give them an ultimatum or dishonor them in some way. And we can see right now that the deep state, they're trying anything and everything to mess up the peace process in North Korea. We see Russia is now calling on the king of Jordan, saying, listen, we need your help to stabilize these Syrian safe zones. And it looks like Jordan is moving closer and closer to Russia, and they're assisting in this area where before Jordan was working with the deep state, where they kept the borders open, weapons would come in and out, they would train the moderate rebels and the paid mercenaries, the terrorists, and they would bring them into the country. And now we see things are changing. We see that a second wave of pro-Syrian armed forces are entering Afrin, and this time, Turkey didn't fire on them whatsoever. 500 men entered Afrin. It has begun. The Kurds called the Syrian armed forces. They said they were part of the country of Syria, which is a sovereign country with an elected leader. The United States, the deep state, is in the Kurd area saying we're in there because they want to be separate and apart. This is falling apart rapidly. And this was the plan from the beginning, to get the deep state out of Syria. Think about it. We're in Syria because of the Islamic State terrorists. We have to stop terrorism. Well, Russia got rid of the terrorists. We're in Syria because the Kurds need us, because they want to be separate and apart. This is why we built the bases. This is why we were funding their army. Trump stopped the funding, stopped the weapons being shipped into the Kurdish area. And now the Syrian armed forces are working with the Kurds. What is the reason the U.S. is still in Syria? Basically, what has been happening right now is the deep state is now completely backed in a corner. This was the whole plan from the beginning. It's happening in Afghanistan right now, where the routes coming from Pakistan into Afghanistan have been shut down. The supply routes for the paid mercenaries in Afghanistan have been shut down. The Islamic State in Afghanistan, which were transferred from Syria over to Afghanistan, well, they're in trouble. No way in, no way out. They're surrounded. The armed forces there, the U.S. armed forces that are not working with the deep state, they're actually going after the Islamic State in Afghanistan. The poppy fields are being closed down. How do you get rid of the paid mercenaries? How do you get rid of the deep state? You cut their funding off. How do you do that? Well, first, you cut off their drug trade. That's what they're doing. Secondly, you shut down the central banking system. That hasn't happened yet, but it looks like we're heading to that area. Russia is out there saying, listen, we are ready to assist in the settlement of the conflict in the Syrian Afrin area. If you need us, we will work with you, and we will put together a peace plan where Assad and the Kurdish people and Turkey, we all work this out, and we push the deep state out of the country. This has been planned from the beginning. And Russia's saying the most important part of this is the part where we need to implement the UN Security Council Resolution 2254, which is a respect for territorial integrity, sovereignty, and unity of Syria. You can see what they're doing here. They're pushing this agenda to completely remove the deep state from Syria. Now, the deep state, they don't want to leave. Their goal is to stay in there, get rid of Assad, have a war with Iran, keep control of all these Middle Eastern countries, but it looks like it is completely falling apart right now. Now, I wanted to touch upon the Parkland shooting right now, where there are vigils, there are marches, there's chanting going on about gun control. That's pretty much it. All they're doing is saying Trump must do something, Trump must do something. And people are on Trump right now because he decided that he wants Sessions to go after the bump stock. This is a piece that is fitted onto the AR-15. When you pull the trigger, there's like a little spring in it, so it allows you to pull the trigger multiple times to almost act like a machine gun. And he's saying, let's get rid of this, let's make it illegal, because it turns it into an illegal machine gun. Now, what he's doing, which I believe is a smart move, he's trying to counter the argument of the deep state of the gun control individuals. He's not banning guns. He's banning a piece that would make a weapon illegal. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to calm the situation down to say, see, I am doing something. Now, let's think back of what he did with Syria. Because the corporate media was going on about, he's not doing anything. Syria's using chemical weapons. Think about that time period where he fired missiles into an empty airbase, and Russia knocked down most of the missiles, took control of a lot of the missiles, made them crash, and they really didn't do any damage on the airfield. The airfield was operational an hour later. Troops never went into Syria, but it brought the corporate media onto his side for a little while. He's trying to do the same thing again, trying to sway the corporate media to say, see, he is doing something. He didn't ban a weapon. He just went out and said, let's see if we can make this illegal. It's the bump stock, and he wants to calm the situation down. Is he ever going to touch weapons? No. He's playing into the corporate media, saying that he's doing something just like he did with Syria. They all rallied around him. They all said, oh, look how great this is. And it looks like they might be doing the same thing once again. So we can see at this point, he is trying to maneuver around this ridiculousness because he understands that they're never going to give up and they're going to keep putting pressure on him. And this was the whole purpose of having this event there. Now, what's very interesting is that QAnon put out a message where he or she or a group of people said, the clock is activated. Everything has meaning or a purpose. This is not a game. Protect code went live. Code signals clean. We're moving up the timetable. Jack thought he was protected. I'm going to stop right there. Basically, they're moving up the timetable of draining the swamp. Protect code went live. It looks like something happened here where they got information that they might be going after Trump. Why do I say that? Jack, this is probably President Kennedy, thought he was protected, safe, and he got assassinated. He also went on to say, Jack getting nervous, which I think he is getting nervous, that they're ready to do something. Now, we talked about the Parkland shooting before with Marjorie Stonewall Douglas, where she didn't want the swamps drained in Florida, the Everglades. And this was a message to Trump saying, stop draining the swamp here. The other interesting fact of this, besides David Hogg and all the other stuff, is that Parkland, the word Parkland, this is very interesting because it goes with QAnon. QAnon said, Jack thought he was protected, Jack getting nervous. Well, JFK was brought to a hospital called Parkland Hospital. I mean, is this a coincidence that Parkland is where the shooting happened and Parkland is the hospital that JFK was brought to, and QAnon put out the code Jack thought he was protected, Jack getting nervous? Protect code went live? I mean, think about this for a second. Also, we have 17 people that died in this shooting. This is what we're being told. JFK's birth year is 1917. JFK's centennial birthday is 2017. I mean, these are just numbers that I'm throwing out there because it matched the 17 people that died, and I think it's very interesting that his birth year is 1917. And it went on to say that no sleep since drop, task 3 to remove followers in drip order and restrict, coincidence, hot in DC, no sleep, stay tuned. And this tells me that something big is happening here. The deep state, I think, has had it, and I think they have ordered maybe a hit on Trump. It looks like they might be trying to assassinate him. Now, are they going to use a bullet? Are they going to use a bomb? They might even use the heart attack gun, or they might make it look like a complete accident somehow, some way. But this is something that is out there now, and QAnon is saying that this looks like, and as I'm interpreting this, that the assassination is a go, and Trump is nervous, and it looks like Kennedy thought he was safe, and he got assassinated, and all these different little meanings about Parkland, the Parkland Hospital, not to drain the swamp being drained, all of this starts to fit into each other, and we can see right now that the timetable has moved up right now, which I believe they mean that they're going after the deep state and they're going to accelerate the process. And we might even see them move, not just sitting in the background anymore. Forget about the indictments. I think they might make their move to go out and arrest individuals. And I think this is what they mean at this point, whoever QAnon is. And we can see right now that everything is coming to a head right now. And we need to keep our eyes open, our ears to the ground, to make sure that we understand what is going on here. Because if we see any of this happen, we'll see and we'll understand that this was already predicted, already known, way before it even happened, which would tell us that this was planned from the beginning. So here we are right now. Things are coming to a head, and I think things are going to get a lot more chaotic as we go on. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.